3 a.m. helper. On September 12, 2010, around 3 in the morning, traffic moved fast and thin along U.S. Highway 101 in San Mateo County, California. Stacy White, 39, had been driving the wrong way on the freeway, apparently under the influence of alcohol, and her vehicle crashed, leaving her on foot in live traffic lanes. 26-year-old Stephen Pereira was driving northbound when he spotted the wreckage and the woman stranded in the road. Rather than passing by, he pulled over and got out of his car to help her. The two stood near the crash site as vehicles continued approaching at freeway speed. Then, a limousine came through and slammed into the crash debris, striking both Pereira and White. The force of the impact hurled them into northbound lanes, where multiple vehicles struck them again, including a California Highway Patrol cruiser arriving on scene. Officers and paramedics worked the multi-vehicle wreckage, but the injuries from the repeated impacts were unsurvivable. Both Stephen Pereira and Stacy White were declared dead. The freeway did not fully reopen until that evening, roughly 15 hours after the initial crash, underscoring the scale of destruction that began with one wrong-way driver and ended with the death of a man who stopped only to help a stranger. Warehouse Inferno. On September 8, 2025, firefighters from DeKalb County Fire Rescue in Georgia responded to a working blaze at a commercial warehouse on South Stone Mountain Lithonia Road. Thick smoke poured from the structure as crews made an interior attack, pushing into the building to search for the seat of the fire. At some point during that operation, one firefighter became separated from an exit by heavy fire and debris, trapped somewhere inside the burning structure. Master Firefighter Preston Fant, a 21-year veteran of the department, went in after him. Fant had spent more than 2 decades building expertise in specialized rescue disciplines, including swift water, trench, and high-rise operations, making him exactly the kind of firefighter you send when a colleague is in danger. As he moved deeper into the warehouse, the fire intensified, and Fant himself became trapped. Radio communications grew urgent, and on-scene commanders launched a rapid intervention. Crews managed to extract Fant from the building and rushed him to Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, where physicians worked to stabilize him. He died from his injuries, becoming the first firefighter in DeKalb County history to die in the line of duty. Fire Chief Darnell Fulham confirmed publicly that Fant lost his life while attempting to save a fellow firefighter. He left behind a wife and 5 children. Baptized, then gone. On August 24, 2024, around midday, a church group gathered at Boat Dock Park on Lake Waxahachie in Waxahachie, Texas, for a day of celebration and summer fellowship. Among those present was 21-year-old Lincer Lopez, who had just been baptized that morning as part of the group's religious observance. The mood was joyful as members spread out along the lakeshore. Then a teenage girl from the group entered the water near one of the docks and began to struggle, her cries carrying across the surface of the lake. Lopez reacted without hesitation, going into the water and moving toward her. Nearby boater Jacob Bell, out on the lake with his friend Craig McDonald, heard the screaming and saw the girl in distress. Bell drove his boat toward her, pulled her out of the water, and began efforts to revive her. Police and emergency medical crews arrived around 12:45 in the afternoon. The girl was transported to a hospital and survived. Lopez, however, had gone beneath the water. Rescuers located him, brought him to shore, and transported him to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. The Ellis County Medical Examiner later confirmed his identity. The community mourned a young man who had entered the water just hours after his own baptism and never came back out. By the way, if you find this informative, I cover stories like these regularly. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. Now back to the video. Non-swimmer jumps. On a Saturday in late July, 22-year-old Victor Mosqueda of Santa Clarita, California, was walking along the Cahuilla River near the entrance to Sequoia National Park with the family of 5-year-old Vincent Gonzalez. The river was running high and fast from seasonal snowmelt, with currents that park officials described as especially dangerous along that stretch of slick rock and swift channel. Vincent slipped into the water and was instantly seized by the current, swept downstream with no ability to resist. Mosqueda jumped in after him despite not knowing how to swim. Once in the water, he reached the boy and repeatedly lifted him above the surface to keep him breathing, fighting the current with everything he had. As the river battered them both, Mosqueda managed one final act, pushing Vincent toward his father, who grabbed the child and held on. 3 nearby fishermen helped pull the family to safety. Paramedics performed CPR on Vincent, who was then transported by ambulance to a life flight helicopter and flown to Cahuilla Delta Medical Center in Visalia, where he was stabilized and treated. Mosqueda vanished beneath the water. Searchers did not recover his body for roughly 2 hours. His relatives told reporters he never let go of the boy. Park officials noted it was the second drowning fatality at that location in 2 weeks. Mother's last run. In the early morning hours of a Sunday in January 2026, fire broke out inside a single-family home on Heaney Drive, north of downtown Houston, Texas, spreading rapidly through the structure while the Cabrera family slept. 31-year-old Giovanna Cabrera woke to the flames and immediately moved to get her children out. She guided her 6-year-old and 9-year-old out of the burning house, and neighbors helped bring both older children across the street to safety. Then, Giovanna turned back. Her 1-year-old son Gabriel was still inside, and she re-entered through the growing flames to reach his bedroom. By the time Houston firefighters arrived, the home was heavily involved, with fire consuming the garage, main living areas, and attic. Crews were told people remained trapped and launched an interior search under severe conditions. They found Giovanna and Gabriel. Neither survived. Another adult was transported to a hospital in critical condition, and several others were treated at the scene for smoke inhalation. Houston Fire Department Chief Samuel Pena confirms that the mother died after going back in for her baby. Officials also noted there were no working smoke alarms anywhere in the house. Mayor John Whitmire publicly praised Giovanna's actions, and community members organized fundraising efforts for the 2 surviving children. I-10 chain reaction. On February 18, 2024, an American medical response ambulance traveling on Interstate 10 eastbound in Pinal County, Arizona, rolled over and came to rest disabled near the right shoulder around milepost 185 north of Casa Grande. The overturned vehicle prompted calls to 911 and slowed traffic in the area. 2 separate Good Samaritans stopped on the shoulder and approached the ambulance to check on the crew inside. One of them was 48-year-old Gary Fimbres of Marana, Arizona. As Fimbres and the unnamed woman worked to render aid, a second vehicle came through at highway speed and slammed directly into the wrecked ambulance. The impact shoved the ambulance off the roadway and struck both Good Samaritans. Arizona Department of Public Safety troopers and paramedics arrived to find Fimbres fatally injured. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The female Good Samaritan and the AMR crew were transported to hospitals with injuries. Investigators stated they believed impairment was possibly a factor for the driver of the second vehicle, and a criminal vehicular investigation was opened. Both ambulance workers survived. Fimbres was the only person killed. His loved ones later told reporters he was the kind of person who always stopped to help, no matter the risk to himself. Rescuers' fatal fall. In December 2019, San Bernardino County search and rescue teams mobilized for a large-scale operation in the mountains of Southern California to find missing hiker Vamsi Krishna Mokapati, who had become lost in winter conditions on steep, snow-covered terrain. 32-year-old Tim Staples, a volunteer with the county's search and rescue unit, was deployed alongside a partner to work a section of the search area that included icy chutes and severe slopes. The 2 maintained radio contact with command as they moved through the hazardous landscape. Then, Staples' partner radioed that Staples had fallen and become separated in dangerous terrain. The focus immediately shifted from the missing hiker to rescuing one of their own. A sheriff's helicopter was dispatched and located Staples inside an ice chute, indicating a high-energy fall across unforgiving ground. A rescuer was lowered to him by hoist, but officials later confirmed his injuries were fatal. Sheriff John McMahon announced that all search and rescue teams would be withdrawn from the mountain, and the search for Mokapati was suspended, given the conditions that had already cost one volunteer his life. Tributes from fellow rescuers described Staples as deeply committed to finding people who were lost or in danger, a commitment that ultimately placed him in the same terrain that claimed him. Hurricane Irene call. On August 28, 2011, Hurricane Irene made landfall along the northeast, driving heavy rain into communities across New Jersey and turning normally calm waterways into dangerous flood channels within hours. Around 4:35 in the morning, 39-year-old Michael Kenwood, a volunteer with the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, responded with a fellow rescuer to a report of a submerged vehicle in a flooded brook in Princeton. The belief was that someone might still be trapped inside. The 2 entered the water and pushed toward the vehicle, battling strong current and near zero visibility in the darkness. As water levels continued rising and conditions deteriorated, an order came through to pull back. The risk had become too extreme to continue. During that retreat, Kenwood was swept away by the current and disappeared downstream. The rescue operation became a desperate search for one of their own. Searchers recovered Kenwood, and he was pronounced dead. Investigators later determined that the submerged vehicle had been empty. No one had been trapped inside. Kenwood had entered lethal floodwater for a call that required no rescue at all. His funeral drew emergency personnel and officials from across the region, and his death became a defining example in discussions about the decision threshold for entering moving floodwater during active storm conditions. If you found value in this, a subscription helps me continue researching these stories. Thanks for watching.